Okay, now I want to make that a record player here on this table. So let's just move the cursor there. So let's shift right click right here, maybe more in the center. Let's add a plane. We can focus on that with period key. And right now just go to the edit mode and scale this down to fit the table a little better. Something like this. No need for precision here. And let's scale this out on the y-axis, so S, Y, and drag it out a little bit. Now let's go to the vertex select and let's press Ctrl B to bevel and then V. You already know this. And let's increase the number of segments with mouse wheel to something like 5 and make a really small bevel here. And now we can select all and move this up a little bit. Yeah, you guessed it right. There will be some legs underneath later and it will be the same workflow as with the other ones. So let's extrude this. Okay, something like that. And right now we can tab out. Let's call this player. And with the cursor in place, let's press Shift A to add plane. Let's scale this down, go to the top view with 7, go to the wireframe view, and let's scale this all the way down, move to the corner, and again we'll add the mirror modifier and y-axis like that. We can go to the side view, zoom in so we better see what we are doing, and extrude this up. Okay, and let's call these player legs. And we can already parent that, so Ctrl P, parent object. Okay, let's add some mechanical parts to this and the record actually. So let's go back to the solid view, edit the player, and we can snap the cursor on the top n-gon here, so Ctrl S. Cursor to select it, and I think that's not very good right now, so let's again go to the face select this, Ctrl S and cursor to select it. That's more like it. We can tab out and add a circle. Right now I want this to be more detailed, so let's do 24 vertices here. Go to the edit mode, vertex select and scale this down to something like this, and this will be fairly easy, and most of the time it won't be visible at all, but I wanted to make it anyway. So let's extrude this a little bit, scale it. Let's do an inset, extrude down with E and scale with S again. Okay, and that's about that. And let's call this player again. It will add a number there so we know it belongs to the player. And right now we can add another circle, so Shift A, circle. Before we enter edit mode, we can go to the side view by pressing 3 and we can move this up so it sits here a little bit. Okay, and now go to the edit mode. We can scale this down. You can look from the top so you better see how large the record will actually be. And let's fill this. Let's do an inset, so I, and drag all the way to create a little hole there. And right now we can press X and faces. Okay, and let's select all with A and extrude this a little bit like this. And right now just press I again to inset. You can see we are insetting from the both sides. And here where it meets, I think it's a good place to do a little extrude down, so E and then extrude down like this, and that's a record basically. Won't be doing much more for that. If you want, you can expand the selection with Ctrl+, and then press S, Shift Z to scale on the X and Y plane to make this a little bit smaller, but that's that. Now there will be some mechanical parts here with the needle and stuff, and the best thing to do when you're doing something like this is to go and research something, how these parts actually look. So I did that before, and basically I extrapolated it to some really simple shapes, because again this will be pretty zoomed out, so no need to go much into the detail, but it's all up on you. Basically go do your research and look at how the record players actually look like and what parts they have, so they can work properly, and you can go wild with it. So right now you can just follow. Let's move the cursor right here by holding Shift and right clicking, and let's add a plane. Let's scale this down to something like this, and we'll scale it on X, so S, X, and scale it up. And this will be okay, I think. And right now we can just extrude this, do an inset, so press I, do an inset, and extrude again. And right now let's select this edge, press G twice, and do this slide, and here in the back too, but more subtle one. And right now we can select this face here, Ctrl S, cursor to select it. Let's tab out and add a new object here. Let's press Shift A, circle, and we can do only 12 vertices here. Go to the edit mode, scale it down, F to fill, and drag it up a little bit. I think this is too high up basically, so we can go and select both of these objects with Shift or by dragging around them. Go to the front view, edit, wireframe, vertex select, and drag the selection around all these vertices and bring this down a little bit like this, and this one too. Okay, we can go back to the solid view, select the cylinder again, go into the edit mode, and let's add a cube, or we can start again with the plane, doesn't really matter, and do something like this. So it's smaller than the part underneath, but it covers the cylinder very well. And let's make this larger on the X-axis and extrude up. Right now we can snap cursor here, so Shift S, cursor to select it, and that's the part from where the needle will go, or the arm for the needle. So we can go to the top view, wireframe, and let's tab out of this object, and let's press Shift A and add a single vert, or you can add a plane and merge the vertices into one, whatever works best for you. And right now switch to the vertex select, that's the important part here, and let's press E, X, and extrude up until here maybe, and let's do E again and extrude this like that. Okay, and one last thing, select this vertex and press Ctrl B and V to bevel it, make a really subtle soft bevel here, and we can now tab out of this and convert to curve. So either go to the object, convert to curve, or if you added that option to your quick menu, you can press Q and click curve from Mesh Text. Right now go to the curve geometry, and underneath bevel adjust the depth, and the 0.01 is too much, so we can go 0.005, that'll be okay, and keep the resolution to 4. We won't be subdividing it any further, we will just smooth shade it and it'll be okay. So right now you can tap back in, select this vertex and press Shift S, cursor to select it, go back to the solid view. And you can see how in this way you can easily build up or block out anything you want by attaching the cursor to various things in the scene. So let's start with the cube. We can scale it down, something like this, then press S and scale it on X-axis, select this edge and slide this. And that'll be it. Basically we just need to position it correctly, so go back to the top view. Wireframe will help you, so you better see the direction of this, and just rotate this. If you want to be more precise, you can hold Shift to make a really small adjustment, something like this, and then you can adjust the position by pressing G and then X twice to switch to local axis. Okay, so yeah, there'll be the mechanical parts for the record player. The one last thing I want to do here is some knob or something like that. So move the cursor right here, Shift right click and add a circle again, like this. The 12 vertices will be just fine, so go into the edit mode and scale it down. Now we can just fill this, press E to extrude, I to inset, E to extrude again, and scale this down, and we can move it on the Z axis a little bit if you want. And this is the base for your knob. And let's call this player knob. And I don't know names of these objects really, so I will just call them player and they'll be numbered. Okay, and this one is the record, and I think that's all of them. And right now we can just select all of these objects here as well, select the player as last, Ctrl P and parent object with keep transform, and we now have some base for the record player. Now let's finish up with the record player and let's smooth it out. And of course there are several ways how to do that, and by now you already know two of them. Both of them include applying the subdivision surface, and one of them is more procedural, where you apply the bevels with modifiers, and the other one is basically by manipulating the geometry. And there's a third option here, and it doesn't include subdivision surface modifier, so it's not suitable for every purpose. But I want to demonstrate it right here on this player, where we won't be making this edge here smooth out, but I don't want these angles here on the corners to be visible. So let's just select the player now, and we can enable smooth shading. So click shade smooth, and of course now you see the shading looks all distorted because there's not enough geometry information to interpolate between. But we can fix this by adding a new modifier. So let's add modifier and add edge split, and that's a new one for you, so let's see what it does. And right away this is basically job done, and we can move on to more parts. But I want to explain a little bit what happened here. Edge split modifier basically divides your mesh into multiple meshes. So for example, here where you have an object that consists of multiple meshes that are linked together. So if I press L, I can select this mesh, and if I hover with L here, I can select the other one. And that's exactly what the edge split modifier does with this model. It takes the edges and splits the mesh into multiple parts. And there's one simple rule, and there's one value that affects how this will happen, and that's the edge angle here, where it says split angle, and right now it's set to 30 degrees. So it basically checks the angles between the faces, and if they are more than 30 degrees, it will split the mesh there. So right here the algorithm split this to this top n-gon, bottom n-gon, and this stripe all around the model. So there are 3 different separated islands here that are generated procedurally. So yeah, this is another technique that you can use when you're working on something with a smooth shading and you're not going for that low poly flat shaded style, but at the same time you don't want to increase the complexity of the geometry too much, or there's not enough level of detail that you would need to do the smooth edges like here. So you can always opt in for something simple like this. And you can of course cross combine these techniques. So for example, here on the record, let's make this a little bit better because I don't like these angles here. So let's shade it smooth first, and let's add this edge split modifier again. And you can see it doesn't look too much different, but when you look closer from the side, this is actually smoothed out. But if you look from the top, there are not enough segments on this circle to make it look smooth. So we can help it with adding subdivision surface modifier, but at the same time we don't want these edges here smoothed out. So that's where this edge split modifier plays a role. So if we add the subdivision surface right here and increase the viewport subdivisions, this looks as a perfect circle, but the edges are sharp here where they connect. And this can be tricky sometimes. If we modify the angle here, if for example we would have much less segments there or something like that, if we go down, you can see something like this can happen, where basically if you don't have the split angle set right, it can divide your mesh on the places you don't want it to divide. So yeah, just be careful about that. And if you run into problem like this where you're using a combination of edge split modifier and subdivision surface modifier, you always have to check whether you have the right split angle. So let's set this back to 30 like this, and this is done. And for the object right here underneath the record, we can use the same stuff, so shade smooth and add edge split modifier like that. And for the rest of the objects, we'll use the bevel and subdivision surface like on the other ones. So let's select this one here and shift select the table. Right now we can press Ctrl L to make links and select modifiers. You can see right now it's smoothed out, but the bevel is too large here in my opinion, so let's make it smaller a little bit. So something like 0.0025, that's much better. And we can do the same stuff here, so let's select this object, shift select this, Ctrl L, make links with modifiers. But if you look closer, this is not perfect yet, because the bevels happened on the edges of the cylinder here, which we don't want. And that's because there's a bevel modifier and it simply bevels all of the edges. But fortunately it has some options, and if you look closer here you can see there are limit methods, and one of them is angle, so we can enable that. And of course we need to shade smooth this one and this one as well, we forgot that. Okay, and right here you can see there's angle again. Now this is a little bit better, but not quite there yet. We have to modify the angle here, and if you would go down you would see the same thing as with edge split modifier would happen. But if you go up, 31 degrees should be enough to tell the modifier to leave these vertical edges here alone. So this is just to keep that in mind, that if you work with edge split modifier or the bevel modifier, there are these angle settings, and if you run into problems like this where it splits on the places you don't want to, or it bevels on the places you don't want to, this is the setting you go for. So yeah, this is done basically, and we can do the same thing here. So let's select this, shift click this one, Control L, link the modifier, and for the arm here, as I said before, the smooth shading will be enough. We won't need to subdivide this any further because you can see that the geometry is plenty, so we can now just right click and shade it smooth, and it looks great. And one last thing, this knob here, so we can just transfer the modifiers from here with the angle limiter method. So let's click this, shift click here, Control L, and transfer modifiers. And right now we can just right click and shade this smooth. I want 2 of them here, so click the knob, Alt D, Y, and move it here. So that's for the record player, and right now I want to finish the legs on the table and on the sofa here, because this was the method that I was waiting for to show you. So right now we can just select these legs, shade them smooth, and apply that edge split modifier. And we can again modify the split angle here, so set it to 31 because again there are 12 sides there, and the same here, so shade smooth, apply the edge split and set it to 31. So here's the example of how you can use these multiple techniques on a single object, where basically you have something beveled properly, and then you can just use the smooth shading and edge splitting, and for some objects you can go just for the smooth shading, like on these handles here. So that's it for this object, and let's move on.